Okay, let's do a DIY on how to rebuild your coilovers. PC Racing, in fact, they started squeaking on me, so this is a very common issue. The fix, according to them, is to replace the shock cartridges. These mamma jammas. So, with that in mind, that's what we're going to do. We're going to replace it. Who knew? Filling out an RMA to replace defective parts required you, the customer, to do more work. Honestly, to me, I think you should just replace the whole damn assembly and get the whole assembly returned to you, and then refurbish it and resell it like you would any other assembly. But that's just me. First, obviously, what you want to do is remove your coilover assembly. This is my front passenger side. I had one stud that got broken because it was, I don't know if it was over tightened or what, but upon removal it broke. So I did order $5 pack of studs. They didn't send me the nuts with it, so I guess I'm going to the hardware store. But yeah, I put the new one in already, and that's ready to go. So just be a little careful. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a Sharpie here and just kind of mark my threads like so. And then I'll do the same at the bottom. And I'll wrap all the way around, and then that way I can compare that to this one, and so I will have the same ride height essentially, or at least be around the same baseline, so it's easier. Now with my threads marked, I'm going to take your spanning tools, remove your collar nuts, and then start unassembling. So now with the bottom support off, I'm going to be able to take this all the way down here so I'm not scraping up the thread that I marked. Once you got these broken up, I want to lower this too so we relieve tension on the spring. As you can see here, well, maybe you can't see, but you can feel it moving back and forth, the spring, and that's kind of where you want it. That's loosened enough so it's not going to. So let me stand it up to show you. That's where you want it. And before you start taking things apart for real, just make sure you mark your threads on the other one just to match up. As you can see, got everything lined up, so I know roundabouts where I need to be. You'll need a 14mm wrench to take off your adjustment knob. So once you have that off, then you can take this nut off, your top nut, and that's what's supporting basically all of this, right? Your top plate, your spring, bump stop, and everything else in here. So now with that off, now we have just this nut. Alright, so as far as the weight is the same. Serial numbers, I'm guessing this is a serial number or a model number. They seem pretty close in gap. But this is the new one, 037, and this is 030. So this is at least 70,000 more in production. If this is just a wild guess, I'm not saying this to confirm anything, but whatever this T and C identifier is, these numbers actually differ. This is the biggest difference out of them. So instead of 105, we have 111, and for 315, we have 384. Not sure what that means. If anybody does know what that means or has insider scoop on what these letters identify as or what that's an acronym to, feel free to comment that so that way it's helpful. I could pin that at the top. But this is, yeah, there's only some subtle differences and that's it. And I think that might be, hopefully, the big difference in why we had revised shock cartridges for these setups. At first you're going to think, well, are we done now? We can reassemble and put it back on? No. What I'd like to do is just clean all the parts first and then reassemble, because a lot of that dirt and grime and everything could still stay behind, and that could cause problems with your collar nuts and things of that nature. Like, you don't want these getting stuck. Also, it's just better to have a cleaner setup and kind of coat it with some sort of lubrication and wipe it down. That way it protects it from, rust, corrosion, things like that. You want to protect it as much as possible from future failures, right? You don't want to do the same thing twice so soon. Everything is, well, as clean as it can be. I mean, almost looks new. So now here's my new shock body. I'm going to reassemble everything just as it was. But first, before we put the collar nut on, we're going to use some grease Yes, I'm using the black caliper grease and just lightly touching along here and then wiping it down so that way we're greasing all the threads. I'm going to make sure not to hit where I marked, and then go from there. Oh boy. Got that top one on. Got the bottom one on already lined up. Alright, we got this one. This is the support collar here for the spring. Oh. Let's get that on. Alright, you have a small end and a big end. And it tapers down like so. You want this big end down first, like so. Put your dust boot on. And your washer. And your spring. Okay, let this at the preload. And then so. And the nut. Like so. Take your adjustment bolt, or what have you. Take your 14. I always like to set it in the middle, so like 15 clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh shoot. 6, 7, 29, 30. 1, 32, 3. Oh, 32. So somewhere in the middle, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Alright, and now for preload. As you can see, I have this loose in here, so I can actually hand tighten this. So what we want to do is bring this all the way up as far as we can hand tighten it. Now this might be based differently on level of strength or anything like that, but basically you want it so that way it's hard for you to turn it with your hand. In which case it's right there. So now I'm going to bring this locking collar up with my hands. Alright, now the rule of thumb is you want to take your spanning wrench and then tighten this until your locking collar, both collar rings here have enough space to fit your wrench in between. And that's how you set your preload. As you can see here, it fits pretty easily here. Doesn't wiggle around too much, but it's not snug either. It just easily lays in there, and that's where you want to be. And then you just bring this up. All right. And a little bit of tightening. Alright, that's as tight as it's going to get. It didn't budge at all, actually, so just an FYI, in case you're thinking, hey, maybe it's supposed to move. It doesn't. So now time to put the bottom on. So for right now, I have this loose here, only because once I put it on the vehicle, I need to be able to adjust left to right to get things where they need to be. So